Hi gang, on the Joy of Football this week we need to talk about the struggles of Manchester City and the decades of not winning trophies for Newcastle. Joy to the supporters all over the Premier League except of those two clubs.
We have a Voice of Passion 1 in which I agree with everything Neil says.
Letter from the Gantry. Martin Tyler's letter from the Gantry is not so much about Brentford, more about Thomas Frank.
And we have a Voice of Passion 2 in which I fundamentally disagree with Neil.
And we have three of the best: young player, old player, and Newcastle and Aston Villa get more good looks in there.
And we've got feedback, which is a response because we've been asking you to send messages to us. So we're going to exert our right for reply, and we're looking forward to doing that because communication is the name of the game.
And don't forget, you can get more communicative by going to our Patreon. You can also read us on substack.com, The Joy of Football on there. And of course, you can subscribe and leave your comments, as Martin said. Let's go. The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks like Xavi! Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football. Hello, The Joy of Football with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett. You know, The Joy of Football is all about players, and basically this podcast is mostly about that. So let's get straight into it and talk about the rubbish ones at Manchester City. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to talk about Manchester City and Newcastle, who aren't rubbish at the moment. But Manchester City, what has gone wrong?
It's difficult to put it into perspective, really. For me, the backdrop of all these legal tribunals and having to put a case that they won, we must mention that in the Court of Arbitration for Sport. They're winning some battles over the actual wording of some legislation that's been brought in recently by the Premier League. And of course, we all await to see what happens now that the tribunal have finished their deliberations and now working out what the punishment, if there is a punishment, what their verdict will be. I don't think that helps. You could say that's been going on for a while and they were winning all these trophies up.
Send them back to the United Arab Emirates, that's what I say.
Yeah, well, you don't really say that.
I'm talking about the club, not the owners.
No, the truth of the matter is the club has been a wonderful compliment to the Premier League and the way the football's been played. But nothing lasts forever. I mean, if you look at history, any imperial governance of a place, the whole Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was for decades, centuries, and whatever. And in the end, it comes to an end.
The trouble with the Roman Empire is they went on the attack too much and forgot about defending, didn't they?
Do you think that's an analogy?
I mean, I'm going to disagree with you completely on this.
Oh, of course.
It's all about the players. Ederson has not had his best season in terms of keeping the ball out of the net. Kyle Walker has just got old, played badly, and has now left the club. He's on loan only, isn't he? I don't think he's doing too well at Milan. I wonder if he will finish up there. The centre-backs have all been struggling with fitness and appalling when they've played. Rico Lewis has not replaced Kyle Walker. He's not good enough yet to be a top-grade right back. Rodri's not been replaced. They've tried to replace him now with the signings in January, but he's not been replaced. Gundogan has come back and it looks like an old man. De Bruyne has not returned to any form of quality from his injury, and so they've lost the best defensive midfielder in the world, Rodri, and the best attacking midfielder in the world, De Bruyne. I think Savinho and Doku lack the football intelligence of Mahrez. I'm not a big Grealish fan, but
they lack the goals of
Grealish,
Raheem Sterling, to be honest,
yeah,
as well.
and of course Bernardo Silva used to play wide much more. But the guy they miss most of all, extraordinarily, well, not most of all, but who was so crucial to the last few years of success, is Julian Alvarez, who could play. I mean, basically they play a 4-1-4-1. He could play anywhere across the four in front of Rodri, and he could play the one if Haaland or whoever was injured, Aguero before that, or he could play that front, even though he's so tiny. And Alvarez hasn't been replaced. Now, this Marmoush could replace Alvarez, but he can't replace Haaland because he's not got that centre-forward quality so far.
Haaland's just signed a 10-year contract, so no one's going to replace him.
Except when he's injured.
Well, that's an interesting one because it did look serious when he went off. And then he didn't play against Real Madrid, but he was on the bench, but they didn't bring him on, although they could have needed him. So he obviously wasn't right. And then he wasn't involved at all in the next game. So I'm not quite sure what kind of information. Pep's been saying he's waiting for the doctors to tell him. They've told him it's pretty much okay. Erling says it hurts a bit, so he's not played. I mean, even that kind of stuff didn't happen before, really. No. But I don't think you can blame it at any one player. I mean, Alvarez is a good player, but I don't think he's the man who's brought down the Manchester City empire.
No, but let me just give you, for sake of argument, the top three in Spain as we talk. All played 25 games. Barcelona 54 points, Real Madrid 54 points, Atletico Madrid with Alvarez 53 points, right in the race.
With Conor Gallagher. Yeah, I thought you'd tell me that as well.
He's not starting. He's
playing his part.
He's gone on the bench and he's sitting there rather a lot. But Alvarez has become one of the most critical players in the club. Oh. And he is a World Cup winner and a Copa America double winner, and I think
he's a fine player. But the thing about selling him, apart from his abilities, is his youth. So they sell a younger player and have retained older players. And I think it goes back to the loyalty that they showed to the treble-winning side, and the fact that they didn't move on, despite, I'm sure, discussions in the club. I was going to say disputes, probably not disputes, discussions in the club about we've really got to change him, but hang on a minute, they've just done this. And the players themselves are coming in saying, we've just won all these things for you, you've got to give us another contract, and we need a pay rise, and we need all the rewards that bringing the success. So it was kind of a sort of eye of the storm moment, and those things, and they went with, to some extent, loyalty to the players. And I think that's a good thing because football can be brutal. You can win everything, get a free transfer at the end of it, and be out of work. So the feeling is that they've shown a humanitarian side to those players, and they're paying a bit of a price for it because these players are growing old in front of our eyes. And going with that, the lack of results, it's not the age is one thing. I think that the age is definitely one thing, but the fact is you're not winning. That makes you feel older every day you get out of bed.
I agree, but also if you think of who has gone from that treble-winning side, Mahrez is one who's gone. Who the City fans that I know and the City officials that I've known down the years were all, if you watch him every week, he's in and out, he's in and out. But Mahrez hasn't been replaced. He was absolutely world class for them, Mahrez.
But he was of an age where it was time to move him on. Now, if they'd done that with one or two of the others and brought in, obviously they've had the busiest transfer window of all the top clubs. And it does look like Marmoush has really hit the ground running.
But not without Haaland. As soon as Haaland went out of the picture, he became clearly not a centre-forward, but someone who plays off one.
But they've done that all the time with other players playing up there. Phil Foden is...
but it worked. It hasn't worked.
No, but Phil's struggling. I mean, you can imagine for him, he's been... sometimes the cherry on the icing on the cake, but suddenly the cake's looking a bit stale. You don't even get to the icing,
Well, this brings up another question, which we haven't talked about enough, I don't think. The international tournaments in the summer, the Euros, Copa America and everything. Do you think too many of these players are actually ground down?
Well, we have talked about it,
but in the case of Manchester City,
I just throw in one thing that I've learned since we last did the podcast. Really, that one of the problems that football clubs are having, and of course it's not spread across the board, and I'm not accusing any particular club of this, I'm just stating it as a general point, that they train the players to the maximum they feel is right for that week. But there's a group, particularly of young aspiring players, who first team players, who want to go and do something extra. It might be going to the gym. It might be going more often than not to a personal trainer to do extra stuff.
They've all got personal.
Yes, and that is taking them beyond. So the football club isn't training them up to a point. Well, you finish off with your personal trainer. It's training up to the maximum that they believe is right. They've got all the data on them. And then they find out that these players are coming in exhausted the next morning because they've gone and done a set of sprints or some gym work that's really out of kilter with the overall plan from the football club.
Yeah.
So I think I would like to sprinkle. You obviously have a reasonable point there, Neil. But I do think this desire to be a Superman, instead of just realizing as a player that you actually do need to rest.
Have you met any of these personal trainers?
Yes.
So have I. And and all the ones I've met think that the training at the clubs is second-rate, appalling, and not looking after their
Well, it's not individual.
clients.
That's the problem. And if you're a personal trainer, it's like anything. You'd like to think that every footballer in the Premier League roster gets one-to-one time with a coach working on their technique, let alone their fitness. And of course, it can't happen. So the players have some responsibility to do stuff on their own. But you'd be rather they would be out there. I mean, a number of times, even in non-league football, I've said, come on, we're finished. Oh no, we want to stay out and practice free kicks. We want to do some shooting practice. I want to do some, driving the ball. Goalkeepers want to practice kicking. And you go, no, we've done enough. But then there is a temptation. I've done it. Go on, then you've got 10 minutes. Bring the balls in with you. That's what you're basically saying to them. So it's a good thing, isn't it? The desire for excellence, but they need to be told that this is actually damaging their prospects of reaching the levels that they're trying to reach and not helping. But the one-to-one, the guy I know, actually, he's done really, really well for himself. And I don't in any way put down the amount of work that he does and why he does it. But you've got to have a pool of people who want to do it. So they're coming out, they're reaching out. And, it used to be they go down the snooker hall in the afternoons.
Yeah.
Now they want to get fitter. They used to go to the pub. Now they want to drink water. Only if it's Italian water.
There was
it's got to be something prestigious.
There used to be near Heathrow Airport. There used to be a battered old out of use bus, double-decker bus, and it was parked near Chelsea's old training ground, and someone turned it into a greasy spoon calf, and the players used to finish training, go down there and have a full English, but the really fit ones used to get up early and go there before training and have a full English.
I think I've mentioned this before. Near the Tottenham training ground, there is a McDonald's. Other cafes are available, by the way. Restaurants are available. And I saw an England international there. I was early to go and watch the training. And he snuck in for a big breakfast.
I did.
I've never said a word I would not name.
I used to do a question and answer with all the players in the club newspaper every month, and I did one. What do you have? What's your regular breakfast? And about 4 of them said, down the double-decker bus, but don't put that in. And just made something up. And
But
can I just say, what you're saying about staying out longer, when Ray Wilkins was the assistant at Chelsea, if the youngsters wanted to stay out, he would stay out with them and bring some kind of shape to what they were doing. And I can still remember him with 3 young players just standing in a big area kicking the ball to each other, and he suddenly went, right boys, only kicking with your wrong foot, and it was like 35 yards, but it's just that, and all these players were becoming two-footed in a way that they needed to.
You're not going to injure yourself really unless your weaker foot is terrible. You're going to put your body into a contortionist twist. So that's a football reason for staying out, for going off and trying to. The personal training is not really, unless the club prescribes it. The message from the old gits here is don't do it. Stay fit.
Yeah. And don't have the streaky bacon. Manchester City, it's about the players. That's my conclusion.
Listen, it's a fascinating. We're absolutely neutral here, except for Neil, who's Chelsea, and I'm Woking. But no one wants to see that. No one's sort of reveling in it. But it happens, and it's part of the makeup of sport that you can be top.
Goodness.
To be top for so long is sensational.
Yes.
And I don't think Manchester City have got the credit for the amount of trophies they've won, because there's obviously inherent jealousy from everybody else. That's the way the world is.
And Pep hasn't.
No, and they've
historically
they've done it fantastically.
Okay, well, we come on from the club who's
and they
won,
will come back.
We've come on from the club who's won everything to the club who's won naffle. Newcastle United. Why have they won naffle? Just to make it clear, their last trophy was in 1969. Was the Intercities Fairs Cup, not including lower league.
It became
Championships.
That became the UEFA Cup, didn't it? So it was a genuine European trophy.
69, and the last trophy before that was 1955, the FA Cup.
And they last won the league in the 1920s, I think, if memory serves me right. There are lots of theories about it. It's a city centre club, and it provides its
and
special pressure.
A one-club city.
A one-club city, yeah. That's an interesting point, that, because obviously Manchester isn't and Liverpool isn't, so maybe that.
And London isn't.
And of course London isn't. No, Birmingham isn't either, so the big city. But I think the if you like, the accepted explanation is there's too much pressure. The fans apply too much pressure. They want it so badly that to go up there and play is it's put a lot of stress on a lot of very good players who might have won things. I mean, the early Premier League years, where I was up there every third or fourth week when Kevin Keegan's entertainers were entertaining and providing bewildering football, which absolutely crushed the opposition time and time again. But they still came up a little bit short. That famous game, my favourite game of all time, when they lost 4-3 at Liverpool. They were both going for the league and neither of them won it. I suppose in a sense they almost punched themselves out before they could land a knockout blow to win a trophy. The captain, he's a good friend of mine, Bobby Moncur, was captain of that 69 team. He's just turned 80 earlier this year, and he doesn't want to be dining out on I'm the captain of the last Newcastle team to win. He'll be desperate that next month that they go and do what they couldn't do when they faced Manchester United in the Carabao Cup final. But it's Liverpool, and it's a tough ask. So it wouldn't be the biggest surprise, with all respect to what Eddie Howe's doing with the team at the moment. It wouldn't be the biggest surprise if they came up just a little bit short again. But they've got some tools to win this particular job, haven't they? They really have. And Isak is sensational at the moment, and Jacob Murphy is a personal favourite of mine, going down old-fashioned wing player, right-footed winger on the right-hand side, putting crosses in. He's having the season of his life, and they've got a lot of talent sprinkled around the team. But they do have their off days, and when they aren't very good, they really aren't very good. So whether they can have one of their big days, we'll see. But it is one of the great. I'm going to say the great mystery. It's not a mystery, really. In football, you get what you deserve. They haven't quite got teams. I don't think that's the nearest to a hard luck story. I think the Keegan years, where they were so close.
They should have won something under Keegan. But it was a maverick, offensive form of football where maybe defending wasn't given quite the same focus as the attacking. It was, which is why it was brilliant to watch. I mean, they had Bobby Robson as well. Let's not forget they had Bobby Robson, who'd won a few trophies in his time.
They got to the two FA Cup finals in a row, didn't they? And then they lost to Arsenal, who did the double by winning the FA Cup, and then they lost to Manchester United, who did the treble. So they end up, sometimes you don't get the team of the season in a cup final, and they ran up against it both times. So
was Arsenal still Kevin Keegan as manager, wasn't it?
Yes.
And then
yes.
And then Manchester United was Ruud Gullit. And they both went early the following season.
Was it Ruud Gullit the first one and Kenny Dalglish the second one?
Oh, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Kevin left after an FA Cup third round game, I think, because they played Stevenage, and Kenny was manager then. Maybe in the fourth round or third round. Yeah, so it was Kenny's final. It was just one of those, they lose 2-0, I think, didn't they, in the games?
Yeah. And with Bobby Robson, maybe they just didn't quite have the same investment, the same players. And particularly, I think Shearer had picked up a lot of injuries by then and wasn't quite the same force. But they should have won something in the 70s and 90s, not so much the 80s when they weren't so good. They should have won stuff. Yeah. Will they win something in the next 2 years?
Well, the history tells you no, but they're in a final. So they've got, anyone would say, Liverpool will say this is a 50-50 chance. It's a final. So yes, that's coming up, and there'll be a lot of neutrals, with the greatest respect to Liverpool, a lot of neutrals hoping that Newcastle can do it for the reasons you've just outlined.
What would it mean to Eddie Howe?
Would build a statue of him outside the ground.
Yeah.
That's what it would mean. I do think that. There was some ridiculous rubbish going around about, the club really want to qualify for the Champions League next season. I'm sure the owners want the financial boost that would give. Everybody on the football side, from Eddie downwards, wants to win this Carabao Cup as the main priority, and then let the league table take care of itself after that. But if they finish 8th and win the League Cup, they will be heroes forever.
Yes. That is Manchester City and Newcastle talked about. Coming up, a couple of voices of passion. Thomas Frank is the subject of Martin's letter from the Gantry, and of course, 3 of the best, and feedback talking about what you're talking about. But we go to now, Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion.
And normally I'm the voice of reason, but on your voice of passion here, I'm going to echo every word you're about to say. Yeah.
Well, it was just lovely. I was obviously at Aston Villa at the weekend for Aston Villa versus Chelsea Throw It Away, the new title, the new name of the club. And Villa came out and they had, I think there was a mascot to every player. And the first 2...
which isn't unusual.
No, the first 2 with captain John McGinn and goalkeeper Emi Martinez were both in wheelchairs,
which
young
is
kids
unusual,
in wheelchairs. The Martinez mascot was very small, and the chair was very small, and he was bent double, pushing it out, which is not the greatest way for a goalkeeper to walk onto a football field, but he was perfectly comfortable doing it. The John McGinn one was obviously the lead one, and after the Premier League handshake, went to the centre circle to be in the pre-match photographs. And John McGinn, in taking him there, didn't just wheel him there, but he wheelied him there, going in circles and round and everything, racing around the pitch. And it must just have been so exciting for this kid. I wanted it to be me. It must have been so exciting. Yeah. And just...
I can put you in your wheelchair after this and wheel you around the garden if you like.
And Villa did it right. The players did it right.
It's fantastic, Neil. You pointed it out to me. I didn't watch the beginning of the game, but there is so much good in football that gets shoved to one side because it doesn't sell copy or it doesn't get clicks or whatever we're talking about now. We say sell newspapers, that doesn't apply anymore. It's an outdated expression, but it doesn't attract interest because it's
what's a newspaper?
It's what you get online. So it's but these things happen up and down the land. I'm lucky enough to see the players out doing their charitable work, and we get asked a lot to promote, and we always do if we can, so football's full of it's big business, but it's got big heart.
Yeah So well done, Villa. Right, first voice of passion, short and very sweet. Now we come on to Martin Tyler's letter from the Gantry.
Letter from the Gantry.
Well, thanks, Neil. I would like to take you all back 3.5 years to the opening Friday evening of the 21-22 Premier League season. My intro to that new campaign went like this. The start of the 30th Premier League season at the home of the 50th different Premier League club on the 60th different Premier League ground. The first game in the top flight for Brentford since 1947, a 74-year gap. They bowed out with a 1-0 home defeat to Arsenal. By a remarkable coincidence, they start again with the very same fixture. But as you know, not the same result. Arsenal were beaten 2-0 and Thomas Frank, who'd guided the Bees to promotion via the playoffs, had started among the big boys with a prestigious win. The general consensus at the time was that, like other small fry who'd arrived at the top, their stay would be brief. But this is their 4th consecutive such campaign. Already a 5th is a certainty. My preparation for that game in August 2021 showed a massive element of trust from Brentford, particularly given how much it meant to the West London club. For me, always the best prep has been being allowed to watch training. In the early years of my half-century as a commentator, it was rarely a problem. There was usually just the one broadcaster covering any specific game, so for one of my fixtures, it was only me asking. Occasionally, I even made up the numbers in practice matches, and I still have a pair of boots in the back of my car. This was fantastic fun, of course. Sometimes I was pressed into acting as a linesman for a defensive drill. Certainly not so much fun. To my delight, in August 2021, I was given the go-ahead by Phil Giles, Brentford's Director of Football, to attend their final session before they faced their Premier League baptism. COVID was still a worry, and I had to be checked out by the club doctor before I could cross the threshold into the training ground. Thomas Frank himself could not have been more accommodating. That morning, he worked on the 11 to face Arsenal, none of whom, incidentally, had played in the Premier League before. I did personally know one member of the squad, Shandon Baptiste, who'd been on loan from Oxford United at Hampton and Richmond when I was a coach there. Shandon was rehabbing in the gym and was not fit to start the campaign, but Thomas made sure I saw him before I left. It was another kind gesture. There was a lot of polishing up on set-piece routines in that final session, so on the opening night, I was, it turned out, better prepared than the Arsenal defenders for a long throw with 17 minutes to go and Brentford already a goal to the good. The routine I'd seen in practice the day before worked perfectly. Christian Norgard headed in from Ivan Toney's flick on. Norgard is still doing it. He scored recently at Leicester with another header from another set-piece on a record-breaking night at the King Power. 4 consecutive away wins in the top flight for the Bees for the first time in their history. This from a team which earlier in the season had been impotent on the road, though impregnable at home. It also meant back-to-back league wins for the first time this season, both away successes too, at West Ham prior to Leicester. Thomas Frank has been in charge since October 2018, and the club has been on an upward trajectory ever since. Rumour has it that it was Dan Ashworth's desire to bring the Brentford boss to Old Trafford that led to his recent fallout with and subsequent departure from Manchester United. Brentford didn't block Dean Smith, Frank's predecessor, when Aston Villa came calling. Whether Thomas would have wanted to leave is another matter altogether. He has given Brentford a bond that's very hard to break. His style of play is an effective combination of pace, poise and pragmatism. Inwardly, he has the dynamic will to win of any of the great Danish football men of the past. Outwardly, he's dignified in victory and in defeat. If he is moved to question the match officials, he makes his points in private in a calm, considered way after the game. The post-match interviews after the 4-0 drubbing of Leicester were very revealing. Ruud van Nistelrooy, the beaten boss, talked of Brentford's efficiency, organisation, team structure and great physicality. He added, "They are big steps ahead of us at the moment. They control the game, on and off the ball. We were nowhere near their levels." Thomas Frank almost looked embarrassed after the game at high praise from the Sky Sports pundits. He did reveal a part of his rousing pre-match oratory. "You are all brilliant individuals, but you're also a brilliant team. We are more than just an 11. To the TV audience, he also talked of the privilege he felt of his job. To be frank, Thomas, it's a privilege for English football to have you.
Yes. He is electric. If you go to a press conference, if you watch any of his interviews, He's electric, isn't he? He's charismatic.
He's open, and of course, I understand that managers can talk about some things and not want to talk about others, but he has a higher bar in that respect. He lets you in. And that day, I mean, you think 74 years since they played in the top flight, and there's this guy turning up saying, I didn't see you much in the Championship last season. I really want to do justice to the occasion. That's my pitch, if you like, to be allowed in. And half expecting them to say, well, go and watch the tapes of it, and watch the warm-up. Sometimes you have to sell that because you see the faces, but to watch the session and the set pieces in particular, and then for it to unfold in such a significant way to seal, played 1-1 in the Premier League. It was a great time, and I'm really happy. I don't see Thomas much. I've done some Brentford games this season, but I feel he gave me so much then that I don't really want to ask for much more now.
And also, they can play the old Wimbledon way, lump it and chase, but they can play the Manchester City way and play out from the back and really play sweet football.
Mikhail Damsgaard's been came out in the post-match as well. He signed after a year out injured, so didn't really up to the pace of the Premier League in his first year. Then he got injured himself in working for Brentford in the next year. And now they've got him into the kind of player that he has shown in flashes for Denmark. Obviously, he did well against England, didn't he? Wembley. So he's an important part of this, but it is the brilliance of the team and the way they get on. Wisser and Burma were interviewed after the game as well. And they talk, we're great friends off the field, and it helps really much on the field.
Could he have done the Manchester United job?
I believe so. I believe people always say about these managers, they haven't had star names to deal with, or the expectations of a bigger club.
Manchester United,
but they will be trying to recruit some. I think he would have been a very good choice, and that Ruben Amorim has obviously run into a lot of difficulties that Thomas would have done had he been offered the job and had he taken it. I've got no evidence for Brentford fan. I've got no evidence to suggest that he would have done, and that this is just behind the scenes. We're trying to find a reason why suddenly Dan Ashworth, who's the most coveted director of football to be brought in, was suddenly surplus to requirements. So obviously it was disagreement over something. The suggestion is it was over who to recruit to replace Erik ten Hag.
Our producers today are Manchester United supporting Billy and Arsenal supporting Michael. We've talked about Manchester United down the weeks non-stop. I don't think we've talked enough about Arsenal and their sudden last few weeks' demise. I think we need to talk about Arsenal as soon as possible. Next
too many draws is the answer to that question.
Letter from the Gantry, which you can also read if we ever catch up. But there's lots there on our Substack site, substack.com, which is under the Joy of Football heading, and there's lots of writings on there from both Martin and me. Okay, don't forget you can subscribe to this podcast, which helps boost it, and you can like things, and you can put lots of feedback down underneath where you're listening to it. And of course, we're coming to feedback today, a big part of today. But right now, before Three of the Best, we're going on to number 2, Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion.
This is where we might disagree.
Okay. English referees muck up VAR yet again. Not once, not twice, but 3 times in one weekend. And that is because the officiating in England is incompetent, self-absorbed, and absolutely not fit for purpose, in my estimation. Martin, there were 3 incidents. Television dealt a lot with 2 of them. So I'm going to start with one that it didn't deal with, which was at my game, Aston Villa against Chelsea, where Mark Cucurella dragged young Lamar Bogart to the ground from behind after a Marcus Rashford free kick had been muddled away. It should have been a penalty to Aston Villa. I cheered that it wasn't, but it damn well was. VAR looked at it, didn't see it, and, well, let's go straight from there to Goodison Park, where Harry Maguire pulled back Ashley Young, who maybe did dive, but the fact is that if you pull a guy back, you don't look at whether the bloke's dived or not. You just look at whether the pullback has prevented them from getting the ball. Here were clear penalties for Aston Villa and Everton, not given by VAR. Given
on field given.
Not at Villa. On field, not seen. I think. Right. I don't know. It was Michael Oliver.
Referee. Play on is a decision, Neil. So if it was, let's assume it was seen. So it's an on-field decision.
VAR looked.
I think it comes back to the pernickety nature of certain VARs at certain times. Why do you need to get involved? If they genuinely thought that wasn't a penalty, it is a matter of opinion in this case. The Ashley Young one was given as a penalty. Was there enough in that for VAR to meddle with it? A lot of people think not. There was a time, a long time ago now, I would suggest, where Ashley Young was known as somebody who would try a trick or two to win a free kick or win a penalty. That's not been something, a label, he's not got that label pinned on him now. He's playing more as a defender anyway, so not as a winger as he was. But once it's given, was there enough in it to overturn it? Had it not been given, was enough in it to give it? I think either way, it's the interference that probably you're objecting to, and I think probably
it's two things. It is the interference, but more that what I'm really objecting to is this complete incompetence, and I'm beginning to think due to incontinence on the part of referees, this complete incompetence to deal with penalty area action as opposed to the rest of the field action. There should not be different rules in the penalty area to the rest of the field. If a guy's dragged back, if a guy's hauled down, it's a penalty. And what really gets on my goat, as I've said to you before, is when the referees stop the game before a set play, when there's shenanigans going on, and starts lecturing people. Shut the F up. Shut up. Withdraw. It's nothing to do with you. Blow your whistle if there's a breach of the rules. Make sure you do if there's a breach of the rules, and just let play go on if there isn't a breach of the rules. That's what
they're letting play go on, because it's a simultaneous breach of the rules. And to pick one person out, yeah, you could have a campaign to do it. That's been tried in the past, and I think England did pretty well in the 2018 World Cup, getting penalties from corners that were
from good officiating by Italians who aren't
English.
Because
that was the trend. Then the trend now is to let it go unless it's absolutely blatantly obvious. We saw Tariq Lamptey at Brighton v Forest, I think, penalised for doing something, and a penalty was given for that. But he was out beyond the near post,
and it was about 5-0 at the time.
And clear sight. It was in clear sight, and a lot of it's not in clear sight. I don't agree with you about the referees. The one thing that I can update you with is this trial system of players going into refereeing at a level that means that they don't have to start in the park, is happening and probably will be brought in next season. I don't know how many, and it might not be a huge amount, but the Howard Webb is working really hard to try and give this, which has always been, I suppose, received wisdom, that it will be better if you've got ex-player refereeing than the referees who've been refereeing since they were 12 and never had the chance to play. So whether that'll work, we have to see, but we're going to get the chance to see whether it will work, because they're going to give, let's say, half a dozen, maybe a few more, a career with a wage, so they're not starting for 30 quid a game in the park like the referees that you're talking about and slagging off now. They will be given that chance to show that there might be something better round the corner. But these mistakes are made with human error. They're not made because there is absolutely, unlike some other nations where there have been suspect referees have been actually charged for.
I'm not suggesting that.
There's no dishonesty here, but
incompetence.
There is pressure, And funnily enough, one of the great sayings about football, and way back before VAR, was it'll even itself out over the season. For Manchester United being saved from a potentially losing penalty at Everton, go back to before the turn of the year to West Ham, when Manchester United, through VAR, were awarded a penalty against them, which hadn't been awarded on the field, and it won the game. Jared Bowen scored the penalty, and they were on the wrong end of it. This time they're on the right end of it. So is it just with the technology? Is it just the old adage coming true again? It will even itself out.
Well, we also had Zibani sent off for Bournemouth for his challenge on, was it Aït-Nouri of Wolves, for what looked like a collision, not a particularly nice collision, but something that simply wasn't a challenge that was going to bring Aït-Nouri into danger, except for the accident of the way he twisted after winning the ball.
It was an on-field yellow card.
Yeah.
You happy with that?
Yeah.
But then Zibani booted the ball away and should have been given a second yellow card for delaying the restart. But they missed a trick because he would have then been sent off without VAR having to come into it.
Yeah. But VAR came into it and you get a 3-match suspension unless they appeal, rather than a 1-match suspension then you got for booting it away.
Yeah.
Double yellow
for
card.
a double yellow card, you're right. But the truth is...
the referees got it wrong again.
No, I don't agree with you. I don't think it's from my personal point of view, my love of football, my joy of football, I don't think there's anything wrong with that because nobody got hurt. And
so it's not even a yellow card.
But you can't in I don't know how long we'll have to go back. 20 years, maybe. It would never have even been a foul, probably.
No, and I'm not sure it was.
But
it was a collision.
When you tackle and your foot goes up off the ball, you are responsible for that. Whether it's the ball forcing your foot up or whatever,
accept that.
You are responsible for that.
So I accept the yellow card, but never a red card. It is the duty of the referee, and that includes the VAR referees, to keep the game 11 versus 11 for as much as possible, unless
it's
there's
not the duty of them. It's their love for football should put that in the back of their brains, but it's not a duty to do that.
It is.
Their duty is to make sure the players are the laws of the game are upheld and the players' safety is maintained.
Yes, but you don't send them off because you're a pernicious, vicious, officious referee. You send them off because of a real breach of the laws, and this was
he didn't send them off. He didn't send him off. The VAR sent him off.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about the referee on the pitch.
But now
I'm talking about the VAR officials.
Yeah, now you're dealing back with his VAR the right way. If there was no VAR, then he would not have been sent off.
So now
Lewis Skelly would not have been sent off, as he certainly should deserve to be sent off. So, where you go with this, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
No, you don't. You're not. It's the obligation of the officials to get things right, and too often the officials are making it about themselves and interfering and getting it wrong. When they get it right, pat on the back, fine. Arsenal, Lewis Skelly,
we've done
fine.
50 podcasts or something like that. I haven't heard you pat one on the back in any of them.
Because
it was right to send off Lewis Skelly, wasn't it? Are you going to go? You're going to say that?
Yeah. Congratulations. It was correct. Yeah. But in England,
so pat on the back.
Refereeing is incompetent in the main. It is not as good as it is in, say, Italy, unless, of course, in Italy, just once or twice, there's a little bit in the pocket behind. But yeah, okay, that's it. I'm angry.
Yeah, and I think you're off the beam with that. I do think you're being very unfair, and I do think there are errors. They're human beings. I've said this.
Now there is a whole new discussion.
I will say that the big mistake, and this is me reiterating, the big mistake is to try and make them referee the same. The search for continuity should be based on continuity and consistency within yourself. So if you have a strict referee, he needs to be strict all the time. If you have a jolly chat to the players type referee, he needs to be like that all the time. And all they need to do, and all you need as players, is to know he's refereeing today. Watch out for this. He might be that, because he's doing it for himself. These people refereeing at any level in any country now are being told to be something that they're not. It's like telling a commentator that you've all got to commentate the same way. And all the commentators, and now there are lots and lots of them, they're all being themselves. Now, you might like them and you might not like them, but that's what they're being true to themselves. They're not being told by anybody above saying, yeah, of course you've got to get the names right. Of course you've got to work within the time frame. Of course you've got to be nice to your co-commentator, which was my speciality. I loved having co-commentators. I really miss them when I do games on my own. But it's you're allowed to do it. Now, the referees aren't allowed to do it. They have to conform to certain things. And most of the problems we're having with this is them thinking, well, if I don't do that, then I will be marked down.
Yeah, but there's also the quality of the selection of playbacks that they're showing to the referees on monitors, as Match of the Day pointed out. Yeah, but and that is a real problem as well.
They were shown, I'm told, the one you're talking about was Abani, it was shown where the point of contact was. That's why it was shown.
Yeah, but they let the player down. The officials let the player down, and I'm not having it, because it's about the players, not about the bloody officials. There you go. Right.
Welcome to the joy of football.
Feedback coming up. But first, 3 of the best.
And he makes them pay.
3 of the best. He's made them pay. And that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
As normal, 3 of the best. Young player, old player. Martin, young player.
Yeah, I've gone with Lewis Miley because of the contribution he made to Newcastle's last game. It was his first start in the Premier League for a year, almost to the day. And with the midfield being so strong at Newcastle, he's also had injuries in that 12-month period as well. But he's such a gifted young midfield player, attacking midfield player. I'm sure you'd give him any job and he'd be able to do it. He looks about 12 years old, although he's
facially, not physically.
No, that's right.
He's a big boy.
He's baby face, but with a man's body, isn't he? And he scored a very good goal after they'd conceded.
He is a very good player.
He's a really good player, and what I liked about it, Eddie Howe kept him on for the 90 minutes. Obviously, Joe Linton's injured at the moment, so
plus also Tonali, I know, didn't train. I don't think.
He came on as sub, yeah. But Joe Willock, who I talked about recently after his contribution to their win at Birmingham in the FA Cup, he was the midfield player who was substituted. So Lewis got the full gig, and I think that's also a step forward for him. It's easy to substitute young players, really, for manager's point of view. Although it got a bit scary at the end, he was still controlling the ball on the edge of his own penalty area and passing it rather than booting it into the stand.
I think the other thing about him that I've always found out when I've gone to Newcastle and Newcastle have come down to London is the staff seem to love him as a person, which helps.
No, he's. I'm sure he'll be in of the best for a long time to come, and I hope he gets a run. But you only get in the end what the manager says is right, and Eddie Howe's done far more right than he's done wrong to develop a player and keep talking what we talked about earlier, going to win a trophy. But it wouldn't be beyond the possibility that he might come on as a substitute at Wembley and score the goal that makes history, but we'll see. There's a bit to happen before then.
My young player, I've mentioned already, Lamar Bachada, as they say in the Netherlands, but I rather suspect that when Winston, his uncle, was playing in England, you probably called him Winston Bogard.
I probably tried to get the Bachada through, but it didn't get through the ratification period. But he didn't play very often. Well, we talked about him.
He was there for 4 years at Chelsea. He started 4 games, and I think he had 14 sub-appearances. Have
you got his bank details from that period as well?
It was part of the breakdown of that era that he was signed with possibly the manager not wanting it, and he finished up refusing to be paid off because they wouldn't pay him off the fullness of his contract, and he moved back to Amsterdam and flew into training at Heathrow, which was right next to the training ground, every day,
and flew home.
Crazy. But Lamar plays in the same he was a left-sided player, defender, Winston, centre-back or left-back. Lamar is a left-sided. He came on early in the second half when poor Tyrone Mings, just so many injuries. He had to go off. And he came on to partner Ezra Konsa, and he did very, very well. It's the first time I've seen him in the flesh, and he did very, very well. He's big, he's strong, he's like Winston. People forget about Winston Bogarde. He was in the Ajax setup that won the Champions League in 1995. I think he might have been a sub, and he played in the 96 final, I think, when they lost on penalties to Juventus, and 2 finals in a row there for Ajax. But Lamar looks a very good player indeed, strong and technically good, just a modern centre-back. And it'll be interesting to see how many more opportunities he gets now.
If he doesn't, the airport's pretty close in Birmingham, isn't it? Anyway, so.
Yeah. But
you're right. He's had more opportunities recently.
Yeah.
And it's nice to know.
Like the look of it. Look of him. Old player.
Well, there's a continuity from what we're talking about. I've gone for Unai Emery, who was a player, but we use this category for senior assistants in football, whatever their jobs are, and of course we know what his job is. He's doing a brilliant job. Why I picked him is because the whole issue with Marco Asensio and Marcus Rashford, a couple of weeks after the Villa fans that I know were absolutely in bits because John Duran was going or gone. And Arsenal made that late bid for Ollie Watkins, and we had no strikers. There was the fans talking, basically. And of course, Villa have also got the pressure of the financial restrictions, which put them in some jeopardy in the Premier League, maybe, and some jeopardy with UEFA as well. And that's what is suggested. So there is a backdrop of having to do it within a budget, and to turn it round and then produce the players that of that quality. And they've automatically qualified for the last 16 in the Champions League with great credit, and they are still in there pitching in the Premier League. So I just think to do all that is it's above and beyond putting the 11 out on the pitch, and obviously he's had a big say in it. That's the way Villa work, and I think it looked like a real dip and a disaster even for the club, and he's come out smiling again, and they're a great watch. I'm sorry to tread on your corn because obviously the last performance was very good against Chelsea. So that's I'm thinking Unai deserves a special mention for what he's done in the last 2 or 3 weeks, let alone what he's done since he joined the club.
Outstanding. Right, I've got loads of old players, and they are Jackie Milburn, Wyn Davis, Malcolm McDonald, Andy Cole, Les Ferdinand, Alan Shearer. Newcastle number 9s. Now, Newcastle and number 9s have a kind of resonance. The number 9 has always been crucially important to Newcastle
because
supporters.
of the position that it represented until squad numbers came in, basically.
Centre forwards, yeah.
Yeah.
And they won 3 cups in the 1950s. Jackie Milburn actually wore number 9 only in 2 of them. He wore number 8 in one of them, the most recent one, 1955. But Jackie Milburn's statue, there's a statue of Jackie Milburn, obviously, at St James.
He scored in the first minute in that game, didn't he? So just to talk about his stature as a goal scorer.
Yeah, and
whatever
I
number
mean,
he had on his shirt, he scored.
For really, until the 90s, he was the last great icon. I mean, Malcolm McDonald was an icon. Wyn Davis, I've just thrown in there because I know you loved him because he couldn't kick a ball, but he couldn't half-head it.
You're confusing.
Ron Davis, I know, was your favourite.
Ron Davis is my hero.
Yeah.
Ron competed with Wyn at times for the Wales sub, so I was not a fan of Wyn Davis because if he played instead of Ron as a young boy, I was very disappointed, and that did happen a couple of times.
Yeah, but Ron was better than Wyn. But Wyn Davis, you wouldn't want you need a centre half with special jumping ability to face him. Malcolm McDonald was a very good centre forward for Newcastle, England, Fulham, Arsenal, and then the 90s, Cole, Ferdinand, Shearer. They were all outstanding centre forwards, and they haven't really had one of that nature since until Alexander Isak. Callum Wilson certainly was.
Callum Wilson wears the number 9.
Yeah, but and
Isak
if
plays
only
the
he had
number
the
9.
fitness to go with his other qualities. But Isak has come in, and I think he's a worthy successor to those fantastic Newcastle icons of the past, and it is a very special position to fill at Newcastle. And if he gets the winner that gives them their first trophy.
Isaac v Van Dijk, that's going to be a key battle, isn't it, in that final?
Your player this week?
Yeah, there were a few candidates actually. In another podcast, I'd like to talk about Jed Spence because I think he's done amazingly well. I first saw him playing on loan at Nottingham Forest, on loan from Middlesbrough. And when Forest got promoted, they didn't keep him for reasons that I will try and find out before I talk about him. But he's come almost a last resort with injuries into the Tottenham team and done extremely well. And he's an interesting case because Postecoglou has talked about him quite openly, quite recently. So we'll maybe do that next week. But I've got to go for Jared Bowen because his contribution to West Ham United is above and beyond the call of duty, really. He's, the winning goal at Arsenal, where he's run from one penalty area to 5 yards out or something to score. His goals are always, I think he's got 8 in the season, but maybe there was one against Crystal Palace early on when they won at home to Ipswich. But the penalty winner that we referred to earlier against Manchester United, a winner which I commentated on at home to Wolves at the London Stadium, a winner on Boxing Day away to Southampton. He scored at Chelsea, put West Ham in front when he was just back from injury, and he got the winner against Arsenal. And West Ham have only scored in the last 3 games 2 goals, and he's got both of them, and he's just back from injury. It's just it's remarkable, really, the reliance on him and the way he shows up for them. You know, you could never say you see a Jared Bowen game where he hasn't turned up, and goodness me, it's quite a record, and they would be in serious trouble. Those points-winning goals that I've just mentioned, you know, imagine where they would be. And I've got them coming up in my next commentary, so I'll report back. And he probably has done some damage to the team. It's the game against Leicester, where he will fancy getting some chances, and they got beaten at Leicester when they had 25 shots, maybe even more than that. So it'll be interesting to see it in that game. But he's just proper. He's just proper. And that's the biggest compliment in football you can pay anybody. If you're proper, gosh, yeah, that's a medal on the chest.
I still don't understand why Manchester United go out and pay 60 million for a striker that is really unproven when they should be paying that for a striker who's not old 2 years ago, 3 years ago, was still quite young and can fulfil all positions up front. Bowen would have been a far better signing for them.
And he scored a goal for England, of course, in his time, hasn't he, in recent times, which he thoroughly deserves. He's one of those players for England, you probably think, oh, is he going to start? He's always going to be on the bench, and you're in trouble. You know you're going to get a response.
I've got 2 players this week, both Aston Villa. We got themes running through the show,
we have, yeah.
The podcast this week. Marcus Rashford and Yuri Tillemans, not Marco Asensio, who won the Sky Man of the Match. I understand why he won the Man of the Match. He got the 2 goals that won the game 2-1, and he played quite well. But the goals themselves were one was a 6-foot tap-in that was a little bit graceless.
He scrambled it in.
Yeah, and the other one was, of course, a howling goalkeeping error. Rashford, on the other hand, shone. He came on at half-time and he shone.
Isn't it nice to be saying that?
And the great thing about him was we've heard so much about his body language. His body language was, I'm a flipping good footballer, give me the ball. And I come back to it's all about the players. And if the player loses his way at a club like Manchester United, you have to ask why. And yeah, all the focus is always on the player then, which is to a certain extent understandable, but maybe the focus should be on the club as well. And how can he walk into Aston Villa and just shine? But that's what he's done. And, you know, he'd started, I think, the last game, but Jacob Ramsey started this one. He came on at half-time and he took the game very much by the scruff of the neck. And he, for me, was the guy who changed the game. And everything he did looked balanced. And everything you've heard about him over the last 18 months has suggested a lack of balance, whether it's attitude, mental health, whether it's God knows what. He looked flipping balanced. And
but he has to take his share of the blame
Yeah,
for what's happened
yeah.
to him. And maybe that's what he's doing. And
maybe we go back to Unai Emery and what he can offer to a player in those circumstances. And I include Yuri Tillemans in this because Yuri Tillemans had an outstanding game. I'm not Yuri Tillemans' biggest fan. Many years ago on my American radio show, Eddie Niedzwiecki came on at the beginning of the season, who, of course, coached at so many big clubs, Chelsea, Arsenal, Manchester City, and so on. And we finished up by asking him, it was pre-season or the beginning of the season, by asking him, who's a player for us to watch this season? And he said, Yuri Tillemans, signed for Leicester, just signed, and went through all the reasons why he thought Yuri Tillemans was a top player. And the thing that always disappointed me about Tillemans, I just don't think he is that athletic. I don't think he gets around the pitch quite enough. I'm looking at Enzo Fernandez. I'm looking at Jorginho, those players who just lack that extra yard when it comes to it. And I think Tillemans is one of those. I don't like him because he's done me a lot of damage down the years. He scored the FA Cup final winner.
Goals, yeah.
Well, if Kepa hadn't jumped as he shot and landed and then taken off, it would have not been a difficult save. But I've just lived through goalkeepers who aren't quite top draw for too long. But Tillemans didn't get in the team immediately when he left Leicester and went to Villa. And I thought, there you go. And obviously he's not quite of what is required. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. He's running the games. He's absolutely magnificent. He's getting around the pitch. Yeah, he still lacks that half a yard when it's really needed at times. But he is a top midfielder for Aston Villa. And Unai Emery has got the best out of Rashford in 2 or 3 weeks, and he's got the best out of Tillemans now in, I think, his second season at the club. And he is looking a top midfielder. And he seems a top bloke, doesn't he, whenever he's interviewed. Yuri.
My dad was an ironmonger, and we used to sell Emery paper, like sandpaper, and it was there to knock the rough edges off various substances. And he's knocking the rough edges off his footballers, isn't he? He's living up to the name.
Yeah, lots of themes this week. And now a new segment. And we're calling it Feedback. Sorry about the noise. Silly idea, really. But we'll keep it. We've had loads of feedback over the last week, and there were hundreds of thousands, literally, of you listening to the shorts and the podcast from last week. And so there has been lots of feedback. So the more you listen, the more you comment, the more we'll try and get this in. And what we've got subject-wise, Martin's young player last week was Chidi Obi, the Manchester United youth team player who started coming on for the first team. Manchester United for Life has commented, I hope Chido will get more minutes. And anyway, against Everton, he offered much more than Haaland. Brendan says he's going to be massive at United. And Griassi says Denmark probably going to be late with his national lockdown. He can actually qualify for Martin.
England and Nigeria, I think, is his actual family background, yeah.
As well as Denmark.
Yes. I'm a Denmark. He was born in Denmark, so definitely Denmark, yeah.
And better than Haaland. I mean, it's a bit early.
You mean Højlund?
Højlund. They're all...
Yeah. Haaland is the Norwegian way of saying Haaland. That's what will confuse people. Yeah, Rasmus Højlund. Well, he's got a chance. I mean...
he needs to score some goals.
He needs to get minutes. He's now come on in 2 big away games. It'll be interesting to see how he does when he gets a chance at Old Trafford.
A lot of comeback on Chelsea's demise over the last weeks. Cassian Simon says, Grandpa knows what he is saying. Only facts, Grandpa. Sunshine. You're right. I am a grandpa. Only Halftooth says, straight up facts. We lost our identity the moment Roman was ousted. These new owners have no clue to what it means to be winners. I don't think they've got a clue, quite frankly, if I'm being honest. Halftooth. But was the identity lost with Roman? The identity had maybe changed a little bit.
You don't have to be winners in American sport. You've got the guaranteed franchises of the sports.
Yeah, you got to be profit makers.
That's all that matters.
Yeah. Kenneth says, gutted as Chelsea fan, but we've got Palmer for now anyways, but I can't watch the team anymore. Performances have gone downhill. That's a test of a real supporter, though, isn't it? When your performances go downhill, are the supporters still there? And I think
try following a team that's bottom the Isthmian League South, which Woking were in the 1980s. So you don't know where you're born. You've had all these honours in the period going back to the year when you were 10 years old, 1955 was it? Oh no, I was 10 years old.
Yeah, I was 2 years old.
Listen, I think supporting a team is an accident of birth, really, isn't it?
It should be. Now it's an accident of which television station you
it's an accident of which player you really like, and you follow the player. But there's room for all types. There's nothing wrong with that kind of support at all. But the way we were brought up is it's a job. It's like a pet. It's for life, isn't it?
And I have to say, that sitting at Villa Park, looking across at that. Well, all the stands are wonderful at Villa Park. We've gone through what a great stadium it is. But looking across, and there's some light blue seats above the centre line, which are obviously the most expensive corporate seats, a third empty. And it is not about selling seats expensively and having empty ones next to it to make your profits. It's about filling those seats and getting the atmosphere that makes this the greatest
crowd
game
is one
in
of
the
the
world.
great expressions that a commentator has to work with. In front of a sellout crowd here today, you've got everybody with you because they can't get there. They've got to stick with you watching, haven't they?
Right. Your letter was about Birmingham City. And we've got some comeback from Birmingham supporters. Mike Goodhead, thanks, Martin, for your kind comments. We certainly are going places. Watch this space. Con Blue, we have UB40, the NFL GOAT, and now Martin Tyler. Oh, and Bielik at the back. Alfie in attack. And we talked about Borussia Dortmund.
Alfie May can't get in the team, I don't think, but he is in the attack. And he's what a career he's had. Even non-league player going, I know Neil doesn't like me banging on about non-league.
I love you
my
banging on
special
about
subject. But he worked, did he work his ticket in non-league football, and every goal he scores. I think he might have scored 100 goals now in all competitions for senior clubs, for league clubs. So brilliant. And maybe get one at Wembley, because since I wrote that letter and broadcast it here, of course, they did get through their semi-final to get through to Wembley in the EFL Trophy.
That's the problem with songs about more than one player, is that one goes and gets dropped and the song doesn't have quite the same refrain as it had before. The other thing that really is annoying me at the moment about club supporter songs is some load of supporters come up with a quite good idea for a song and then everyone nicks it. It belongs to that. Everyone's doing that Liverpool song now of ole, 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 ole.
Yeah, but by the way, I've done Dortmund, that we mentioned in the last podcast. They sing "You Never Walk Alone."
Yeah, like Celtic.
Yeah, but I mean, there's not a ground as big as Dortmund, the Celtic or Anfield. It was amazing.
Oh, it is.
All sung, of course, in English as well, which is sort of...
Well, we've got one here.
It was by far the best part of the night of Dortmund 0, Sporting 0, I can promise you.
This is from Carl. A similar story to Dortmund this season is Valencia. Massive club, massive stadium, and now in a relegation fight. Even Sevilla are 12th right now, while smaller clubs like Rayo Vallecano and Mallorca are competing for Europe. Spain is entertaining this year. But Valencia, I mean, is just a
There's been a troubled team, hasn't it, for a while?
Yeah. Very, very sad.
But Dortmund won 6-0 at the weekend for Dortmund fans, and I know there are people in England that go and watch Dortmund because it's financially viable, and the ticket price of the games are so cheap you can lump in the airfare and you're still cheaper than going to watch maybe a closer Premier League team. But Guirassy scored 4, and he is their player. He is
who they signed from Stuttgart, who came second. This is from KRO 1875. Tyler and Motti, the voices I associate with my fondest football memories. Great to hear him talking so positively about the club I love.
Rest in peace, Motti.
That's the feedback we're picking up on this week. Thank you, everyone who responds. Hasn't got any better with Chelsea, has it? Is it good? How's Woking doing?
Very well. Under Neil Ardley, the former Wimbledon player in the Premier League years back in the day. Very well. Coming up is the quarterfinal of the FA Trophy away to Oxford City. We're 1 league down. Artificial pitch, which is one of my pet aversions in football. I don't have as many as you do, Neil, but that is one of mine. If you want me to do a voice of passion, I'll do that about plastic pitches.
We will, definitely.
And they're going well. And the academy where I help out a little bit, we had some ups and downs, but the point is trying to get 1 or 2 players nearer to the first team. A couple have had a few minutes, but we haven't got anybody who's really a regular member of the squad. So that's a challenge for the next couple of months.
Your problem is that you commentate on grandsons and sons and grandsons.
Jack Hinshelwood scored, didn't he?
Of players that you've commented on previously.
Yeah.
My problem is that I remember interviewing Neil Ardley when he was in the Wimbledon youth team and thinking, kid, you're a young player with promise.
He still looks
you
like
really
a
are a young
player
with promise.
The stress of management has not aged him.
Now honestly.
He's doing a great job. Great job.
Right. That's the podcast this week. Keep your comments coming in. We've got some great guests coming up, but more of that on another occasion. If you keep contacting us, we'll have more feedback from Martin and me.
Yeah, thanks for the support. The figures have been great recently. We love you. Thank you.
That's right. Patreon, Substack.com, subscribe, comments below, and if you are a Southampton supporter, we can probably set up some kind of emergency line for you in order to just survive the rest of the season. Hello, Southampton supporters. How are you?